Number 5. This happened about 3 weeks ago. I was home alone, and it was around 2 a.m. when I heard a knock on the door. My room is in the basement, and I couldn't really hear it all that well because my TV was so loud. I thought it was just all in my head. I wasn't wearing anything really but a sports bra and shorts, so I didn't want to go see if someone was knocking. Half an hour passed by, and I heard footsteps upstairs. It frightened me a little bit, but I figured it was just someone playing a prank or something. But then I gave it some more thought, and thought who would come to my house and try to scare me at 2:30 in the morning. I ignored it and fell asleep. I awoke around 3 because I heard someone trying to open my bedroom door. I got so scared and didn't know what to do. I was making my way out of a window when a man kicked my door in and started looking for me. I ran across the street and called 911. The cops said that someone had broke into the house and were going through all the rooms to check and see if anyone was there, leaving all the lights on. I never saw him again, and now we're moving. Number 4. This happened when I was about 7 or 8. I think I'm able to remember it in pretty vivid detail because it was so terrifying. I was still living in my hometown, in a small house on a calm residential street. My stepdad was a truck driver, so he was often gone, and it was just my mother, me, and my 3-year-old little sister. Since it was summer, we had the front door open with the screen door closed to let the breeze in, and I was laying on the couch watching cartoons while my mother took a shower. My younger sister was on the floor near me playing, and we were more or less ignoring each other. I remember I was upset because none of my friends could come out to play. The town I grew up in is rather small, and on our street we knew most of the families, many with kids my age. Everything started with a hard knock on the floor, causing both my sister and me to jump. The way the couch was positioned, I couldn't see the front door, but my sister was close enough to it that she could. She didn't say anything and just stared, so I figured it was someone we didn't know. I jumped up and ran to the bathroom to tell my mom there was someone at the door and ask her what to do. As I was just starting to say what happened, my sister appeared at my elbow, her eyes huge.
"The man put his head on the door,"
is what she whispered, which we later figured out meant he bent over to look in the screen because the screen door was locked. My mom stuck her head out of the shower, and we all just waited together, listening. I realized my sister was actually shaking and tried to lean down to tell her it was going to be okay, which is when she whispered something else.
"He has a white face."
Even as a 2nd or 3rd grader, that freaked me out. It didn't make sense she would say that if he was just a white guy. I was just as terrified as her by that point, and my mom seemed ready to freak out. She got out of the shower but left it going to put on her bathrobe, going to look just as we heard a distant, "Hey!" My mom went out of the bathroom first, and I leaned out to look after her. There wasn't anyone at the door anymore. I crept out as well and stood next to my mom looking down at the screen. In the top right corner, it was cut, away from the door. A straight line about 4 inches long. We had just bought this new screen door maybe 2 months earlier, and it definitely wasn't torn. I was too young to really make the connection that whoever had been there was starting to cut through the screen. But my mom looked really worried about it. My best friend lived across the street, and her dad just about scared the 3 of us to death when he popped up from the side of the house. He was a very large man and used to be a biker, and he looked mad as he came up to us. Apparently it was him who yelled "hey" because he saw some guy bent over at our door doing something to the screen. When the guy turned around, he seemed to be wearing a white mask. But before my friend's dad could get close enough to see, the guy bolted around the back of the house. Behind it was a big open area and a hill before the town's nursing home. And by the time my neighbor got into our backyard, The guy was over the hill and disappearing behind the old brick building. My mom insisted on calling the police, and me and my sister waited on the couch together. They didn't seem impressed by my sister's story since she was the only one who really saw him and she was just 3. But I had never seen her look like that, and I believed her. Even now that she's 16 and doesn't remember that situation, my mom and I do. The only thing the cops said was that it looked like he'd cut into the screen with a very sharp knife. Now that I'm older, I can see how odd it is that he did it right in broad daylight. I can't help but wonder if he watched us and figured out my stepdad was a truck driver and was going to be gone for over a week and decided to take his chance. All I know for sure is that the police never caught him. Number 3. Not too long ago, my family and I moved from Pennsylvania to San Antonio. We couldn't find a house right away, so we opted for temporary housing provided by my dad's company. We were sent emails of this beautiful, airy apartment that was like a dream house. It was called Hampton Cove. I was so amazed with the pictures that I begged my parents that we could just live there instead. Of course, they said no. So we started moving into the apartment for temporary housing. When we finally entered the complex, we were shocked, and not in the good way. Needless to say, it was horrible. It was unkept and had strange neighbors, not to mention a lot of snakes. We entered our little temporary apartment and it was a nightmare. It was really dark and only a few small lamps provided any light source. There were a few windows, but not many. It was crammed, and there were strange spots on the wall. They looked like chunks of spaghetti sauce. Needless to say, it was nothing like the pictures. We stayed there for a few weeks, and those were the scariest weeks of my life. First off, I could never be left alone because I was overwhelmed with sadness and the urge to throw up. So badly, in fact, that I panicked and called 911 because I couldn't breathe. I was fine, and they just concluded that I had a panic attack of sorts. I didn't buy it, but whatever. When my dad left on a business trip, my mom would sleep in his bedroom. There were 3 of us, including me, and only 2 bedrooms. My mom couldn't sleep with my dad because he snores a lot, so we split for about 5 days. I woke up to my mom screaming her head off. I run into the room with a butter knife and I just see her crying in the corner. I asked her, "What's wrong?" And she pointed to the bed. Lo and behold, it was covered in cockroaches. They were everywhere, and they were huge. I took my mom and she changed as we drove to the store to buy a bug bomb at around 1:30 in the morning. After setting the bug bomb up, we checked my bed for any critters. Nothing. So we slept in the same bed. What happened next, allegedly, this was told to me by my mom, is in my sleep I said, "Give Sadie back." I don't know Sadie, but my mom was kind of freaking out about it. She woke me to ask me who I was talking to. I'm a rather creative person and I do have wild dreams, so I just thought I was having a strange dream, even though I don't remember it. My mom had woken me up to ask me about it. Shortly after that, our bedroom door swings open. That was all we needed for an excuse to camp out in the living room and watch animal videos on my laptop. We told the front desk about it and they just shrugged it off. The next day, I took my chow, Jake, for a walk. He was a big and rather intimidating dog, but he was nearly blind and pretty old. I would always walk the same small path each time for my dog to do his business. This time, I ran into an old man that I could only describe his appearance as a hobo. messy hair, lost teeth, and a scraggly beard, but it looked like he was dressed to go to some fancy restaurant, complete with a rose brooch. "You walking the dog?" he asked me. I nodded in response. "Be careful down that way. There's a shitload of snakes down there." He just looked at me funny and walked away. I only noticed then he was holding something behind his back, but I couldn't see what it was because he slipped it in his coat sleeve. I had walked down that path a lot of times, and I only ever saw tiny garter snakes. I used to catch them all the time when I was younger, and therefore wasn't scared. They were so small, they couldn't even get their mouth around a baby's pinky. So I continued down the path until my dog started sniffing something in the low bushes. I peeked at it, and when I saw a familiar rattle of a certain snake, I jerked my dog back and screamed. But because I'm young and stupid, I get a really long stick and start poking at it, until I realized it was dead. I dragged it out with a stick in pieces. Someone had cut off his head, and cut his body in sections. It was a beautiful rattlesnake who met a horrible fate. I put two and two together and thought that the man I saw earlier did this. I took my dog and went home. A few days later, my mom had to go with a realtor to look for houses. I had a really bad earache, so I opted to stay home. She left me the one house key just in case I felt sick and needed to go outside. I wasn't too afraid of getting sick again, I just thought I was overwhelmed with stress. Eventually, I got really tired and wanted to take a nap. I took off my shirt and then I see something moving outside of my window. The blinds are halfway shut, and I think it's someone peeping. I was wearing a bra and I didn't really give a shit, so I walk up to the window, only to see the hobo from before, holding a video camera and rope in his hands. I scream, "What the hell are you doing?" He ran away quickly. I put on my shirt and take a rifle from my closet, since the movers wouldn't take guns. I didn't have any ammo, but I figured the rifle would be intimidating enough. I hear a banging on my door, but I just stay in my room. Eventually, it stops. I call my dad and told him what happened, and he left work, picked me up, and we stayed in a small diner for 4 hours, chatting with the manager and munching on some fries to calm us down, until my mom called and said she was done house hunting. We gathered our stuff and found an extended stay hotel to live in. We found a really beautiful house, and we forgot all about Hampton Cove. But one day, my family was driving to the food store, and you had to drive parallel to Hampton Cove's walls. We were stuck in traffic, and I see a man, the same man from before, staring straight at me. We have never told the police, but after seeing that man again, I want to. Badly. And I might just do so. We became pretty good friends with the diner manager, so at least one good thing come from all of this. Number 2. When I got home from school, my grandmother was gone shopping, and my mom and dad were at work. I was basically home alone with my dog Sabin. I was 12 at the time, so I got scared pretty easily. My parents had 3 basic rules. 1. Don't go outside. 2. Don't cook. And 3. Don't answer the door for anyone. I always followed these rules very closely because I've heard about people being kidnapped and bad things happening to them. It was around 6 p.m. at night, and I heard a knock at the door. I wasn't thinking of a kidnapping or any bad things, so I answered the door, and I realized that was the worst thing I could have ever done. I saw a giant figure dressed all in black. I quickly ran to my room and got my phone and called 911. I also remembered that I had a .30-06 hunting rifle on a gun rack, so I grabbed it. I heard footsteps walking over to my room. I saw a shadow of a man and yelled, "I have a gun!" But he did nothing. So I sat there in fear, wondering what is going to happen. That's when I saw the red and blue flashing strobe lights from the police. They came into the house yelling police. They searched the house and took me to my mother's work. They caught the man a mile behind my house in the woods. I'm just glad my first response was to call the police and get my gun. Number 1. When I was about 8 years old, I lived with my dad and my brother. We lived in a double-wide trailer on 2 acres of land. My dad was disabled, and he was going through bad medical problems at the time, and he slept in the living room because if there were an intruder or emergency of some sort, he wouldn't be able to escape his room fast enough to protect my brother and I. He slept on a hospital bed because he was on bed rest and had a bad hip bone infection that had a wound on it from where the hospital had tried to get the infection out. One night, I woke up at 2:28 a.m. and I have no idea why. After spending 15 minutes hopelessly trying to go back to sleep, I decided to pull myself out of bed and get something to drink. As I was getting up, I heard my little brother, 6 at the time, talking. I heard him start to shush something because he knew I was awake. I passed by his bedroom door that was across from mine, and it was a bit ajar. All I could see as I was passing was my little brother staring at the crack. I was passing through the doorway and something startled me. Something touched my back, and when I turned around, it was my little brother. He wanted me to fix him some tea. I told him no. He scared me and to go back to his room. He started mumbling and slammed his door. I took a big sigh and made my way to the kitchen. I opened the cabinets next to the fridge, and a fork fell in the sink off of the counter and made a loud metal-on-metal cling noise. It startled me more than what looked like moving shadows in the darkness. I was already uneasy, and that just made it worse. I thought maybe me closing the cabinet door shook the counter, and that's why it fell in the sink. Anyways, I got a cup and fixed myself some Mountain Dew. I went to put it up, and as soon as I put the Mountain Dew back on the shelf, I felt breathing on my neck. I was starting to say, "Caden, go back to bed," but then it hit me. I was a foot taller than him. I went to turn around, and whatever that thing was, grabbed my ponytail and yanked me on the floor, and I was stuck to the floor. I couldn't get up as hard as I tried, and there wasn't anything I could do. Then finally, it stopped. But the most spine-crawling thing that happened that night was when I stood back up. I heard a faint male voice whispering,
"Don't do it again."
After that incident, I ran into my brother's room and asked him if he knew anything about what just happened. These are the exact words he said. "Yeah, I told him you made me mad. He's standing right behind you. He wants me to tell you to go to bed before things get worse." I haven't been able to sleep regularly since then. And every time I wake up at that time, I have to take medicine or else I'll have a panic attack, believing that something will be waiting for me to hurt me. I had to talk to a therapist for half a year after that happened. No matter what, I think that will be the scariest situation I've ever been in.